The Hells Angels biker followed the little girl into a burned house, where a hidden box rewrote his entire past. I did not expect this. Not tonight. Not here. Not like this. But as I held the letter in my hands, everything I thought I knew about myself began to unravel. I stood there in the cold, the remnants of a house that had been consumed by fire all around me, and I felt a chill deeper than the storm outside. My fingers trembled as I turned the page, reading the familiar handwriting that belonged to a woman I thought I had lost forever. It was my mother's, the woman who had abandoned me, who had disappeared from my life so many years ago. I had never gotten the answers I wanted. But now, here they were, in a box, buried under the ruins of this house. "Jake," I whispered, the word catching in my throat. "This can't be real." But the letter didn't lie. "You were never meant to find this," the first line read, and my heart skipped a beat. "But you have. And now it's time you knew the truth." My mind raced as I read further, each word shaking me to my core. My mother had hidden things from me, things I couldn't even begin to imagine. She had been part of something far darker than I ever realized. She had been a part of the Hells Angels before me, before the violence and the betrayal. But that wasn't the biggest shock. The letter revealed something I couldn't have predicted. The box you hold in your hands isn't just a piece of our past. It's a key to what we've been hiding, a key to a family secret that goes beyond just your bloodline, Jake. It involves the club. It involves everything we've done. The words blurred before my eyes as my pulse quickened. The Hells Angels? What the hell was she talking about? I had been in the club for years. I had seen the loyalty, the pain, the struggle. But what she was saying felt like a betrayal of everything I had ever known. But the letter didn't stop there. It was clear that my mother had known something that could change everything for me. "I'm sorry I couldn't tell you before, but some things are better left buried. Now you have to make a choice. The truth is out there. Find it before they find you." The letter ended abruptly, and I stood there, stunned. I had to process this. The storm outside grew fiercer, the rain slashing against the broken windows like a warning. I wasn't alone anymore. The little girl, the one who had led me here, was standing at the door, watching me closely. I hadn't even noticed her move. "You're not going to leave, are you?" she asked, her voice quiet but filled with determination. I looked up at her, the weight of my mother's words pressing down on me. "Why do you care?" I asked, trying to make sense of it all. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stepped closer, her eyes never leaving mine. "Because I know what's in that box. And I know who's coming for you." The words hit me like a cold wave. "Who's coming?" I asked, my voice low and dangerous. The girl's expression darkened. "The people who killed my father. They're part of the same thing your mother was. And they won't stop until they get what's in that box." I felt my stomach tighten. This was bigger than I thought. This wasn't just about some old family secret. This was about the life I had lived, the life I had built. And now, someone was coming for me. "What do we do now?" I asked, my heart racing. The little girl didn't hesitate. "We get out of here. We find the truth, and we make sure they don't find us first." She turned and motioned toward the door. "I know where we can go, but you have to trust me." Trust her? I barely knew this kid. But something about her, something about the way she stood there, so confident and certain, made me believe she knew exactly what she was talking about. And for the first time in my life, I realized I didn't have all the answers. Maybe it was time to let someone else lead for once. I grabbed the box, tucking it safely under my arm. "Lead the way," I said, my voice steady. She nodded, and together, we walked out of the ruined house into the storm, knowing that whatever awaited us next would change everything. My past, my future, and everything I thought I knew about loyalty and family were about to be rewritten, and I wasn't sure I was ready for what was coming next. The rain hit harder, now a relentless downpour, as we moved through the empty streets. The girl, her name still a mystery to me, led the way, her small frame moving quickly despite the storm. I followed close behind, the box I discovered clutched tightly under my arm. I couldn't shake the weight of what I had read in that letter. The secret my mother had kept, the truth about the Hells Angels, and the deeper connection to my own bloodline. It was all becoming too much to process, and yet I had no choice but to keep moving forward. "Where are we going?" I asked, my voice steady despite the knot of anxiety forming in my chest. The girl didn't turn back. "There's a place we can hide," she said, her voice low and firm. "But we have to make sure no one follows us." Her words hung in the air like a warning, and I knew she wasn't just talking about the storm. We were being hunted, and whatever was in that box, whatever secret it held, made us targets. I glanced around, my senses on high alert. Every shadow felt like a potential threat, and every car passing by seemed like a risk. We reached an old gas station at the edge of town, its lights flickering weakly. The place was abandoned, the windows dirty and cracked, but it looked like it hadn't been disturbed in years. "We'll be safe here," the girl said, her hand resting on the door handle. I followed her inside, cautiously looking over my shoulder. The door creaked open, and the smell of stale air and dust hit me immediately. The girl stepped inside and motioned for me to follow. As I entered, I couldn't shake the feeling that we weren't alone. The building was too quiet, too still. "This way," the girl whispered, leading me to a back room. She pushed open a metal door that led into a small, dimly lit space. Inside, the walls were covered in old maps and photos, all pinned haphazardly with thumbtacks. At the center of the room was a large wooden desk, cluttered with papers and files. I couldn't make sense of most of it, but the girl moved like she knew exactly where to go. She pulled open a drawer and took out a small, silver key. "This is where it all started," she said, her voice quiet, almost reverent. She inserted the key into a hidden compartment in the wall, and a small section slid open to reveal a metal box, identical to the one I had found earlier. "What's inside?" I asked, my voice barely a whisper. She didn't answer at first. Instead, she took the box from its hiding place and placed it on the desk. "You'll see," she said simply. As she opened it, a flood of memories and emotions hit me all at once. Inside the box were old photographs, documents, and a faded letter. But it was the last item that caught my eye. A black and white photograph of a man I didn't recognize, standing next to a familiar face. It was my father, the man I had never known. The photograph was dated from years ago, long before I was born, and yet there he was, smiling, standing with a man who seemed to be a part of the Hells Angels. The same patch, the same symbols. But something about the image, something about my father's expression, made my heart skip a beat. "This is why they're looking for you," the girl said, her voice low but steady. "Your father was involved in something much bigger than you ever knew. And now, it's your turn to finish what he started." The words hung in the air like a heavy burden. I had always thought my father had disappeared for reasons unknown. I never knew the full truth. But now, here I was, tangled up in the same dark web he had been part of. And whatever secrets were hidden in that box, they were meant for me to uncover. But as I stared at the photo, I couldn't help but feel a rising sense of dread. The Hells Angels weren't just a motorcycle club. They were a family, a brotherhood bound by loyalty, violence, and power. And I was about to get pulled deeper into that world than I ever thought possible. The girl, sensing my hesitation, placed a hand on my shoulder. "You don't have a choice, Jake. The truth is already inside you. You just have to face it." Her words felt like a cold slap, but they were true. I wasn't going to get out of this. The club, the secrets, the danger, it was all part of my past now, and there was no turning back. As I stared at the photo, something inside me shifted. I couldn't just walk away. Not now. Not after everything that had been uncovered. And so, with that heavy knowledge, I made my decision. I was going to find out everything. Every secret. Every lie. And nothing would stop me from uncovering the truth about my family, the Hells Angels, and what was hidden in that damn box. The small room was dimly lit by a single flickering bulb hanging from the ceiling. The girl, still standing beside me, watched me closely as I stared down at the photo of my father, his face frozen in time, standing next to a man I didn't recognize. The Hells Angels patches on their jackets were unmistakable, but what struck me most was the look in my father's eyes, determined, but also conflicted. I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to this photo than just a moment in time. There had to be a reason this was hidden away, a reason I was now holding it in my hands. "What does this mean?" I asked the girl, my voice low, almost desperate. She looked at me for a long moment, as if deciding how much to reveal. "It means you're tied to all of this, Jake," she said, her voice quiet but firm. "Your father was involved in something bigger than you know. And now, it's your turn to deal with it." I felt a cold knot form in my stomach. I didn't want to believe it, but everything around me pointed to the truth. I wasn't just some biker anymore. I was part of something much darker, much deeper. I had always known the Hells Angels weren't just a club, but I never imagined my own bloodline was so tightly woven into their web. I never knew. I muttered, almost to myself. He never told me. My father. The girl stepped closer, her eyes softening. He couldn't. This isn't something you just tell your son. He had his reasons. And now, those reasons are yours to uncover. The weight of her words hit me harder than I expected. My father's past had always been a mystery, one I had accepted with a sense of resignation. But now, it was clear that his secrets were my inheritance, and I was left to deal with them. What do we do now? I asked, my voice steady despite the whirlwind of thoughts spinning in my head. The girl didn't hesitate. We find the truth. The box you found. There's more to it than just family secrets. There's something else hidden in that house. Something that connects everything. And it's not just your father's past we need to uncover. It's the whole club's. All the lies they've told. All the things they've buried. I looked at her, unsure whether to trust her completely, but something in her tone, in the way she spoke, made me believe she knew what she was talking about. Maybe I was too deep in this to turn back. Maybe I had no choice but to follow the path she was leading me down. I nodded slowly, the decision feeling like a heavy stone sinking in my chest. Where do we go from here? I asked. She motioned to the box on the desk. First, we finish what you started. We look at everything in that box. And we make sure we don't miss anything. Your father's past is the key, Jake. And the only way out is through it. I opened the box again, sifting through the photographs, the letters, the documents. There was so much here, too much to digest all at once. But one photograph caught my eye. It was of a large mansion, clearly taken decades ago. The place looked abandoned now, but it was the same mansion I had seen in a few of the old stories I'd heard from the club's veterans. The photo wasn't marked, but something about it felt like a clue. I slid the photo out from the pile of documents and showed it to the girl. She took it in her hands, studying it carefully. That's it, she said quietly, almost to herself. That's the place. What place? I asked, my curiosity piqued. The mansion, she said, her eyes meeting mine. It's where everything started. Where the original leaders of the Hells Angels hid their treasure, their secrets. And where your father left his mark. A chill ran down my spine. This was no longer just about uncovering my father's past. This was about something much bigger. Something that could change everything. We need to go there, I said, my voice firm with a new sense of purpose. The girl nodded, her expression serious. We do. But be careful. The club isn't the only one looking for answers. And they won't stop until they find what's hidden there. I felt my heart race. The stakes were higher now, the danger more real. But I had made my choice. Whatever this mansion held, whatever secrets were buried there, I was going to find them. I had no other option. I had to know the truth about my father, the Hells Angels, and the legacy that had been passed down to me. Let's go, I said, standing up and grabbing the box. The girl moved ahead, leading the way. The storm outside raged on, but I didn't care. I was ready to face whatever came next. This was the path I had to follow. And nothing, not even the club or the enemies chasing us, was going to stop me from uncovering the truth. The mansion loomed ahead as we drove through the rain-soaked streets, its silhouette barely visible through the sheets of water falling from the sky. The road leading to it was narrow, winding, and overgrown with weeds, a stark contrast to the neatly paved streets of the town. This place felt abandoned, forgotten, and yet I knew it held the answers to everything I had been searching for. The girl, who had remained silent for most of the ride, now glanced at me, her eyes reflecting the same mixture of anticipation and fear that I was feeling. This is it, she said quietly, her voice barely above a whisper. This is where everything changes. We parked a few hundred yards from the mansion, hidden from view by the thick trees that surrounded the property. The wind howled, and the sound of thunder echoed in the distance, but the atmosphere here was eerily still. As I stepped out of the car, the rain splashed against my boots, and I felt the weight of what lay ahead. The secrets, the lies, the buried truth, it was all here. What exactly are we looking for? I asked, glancing over at the girl. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, weathered map. The mansion is full of hidden rooms, secret passages. But what we need is in the basement, she explained. Your father knew about it. He left clues. But no one's ever been able to piece it together. Now it's your turn. I nodded, though doubt lingered in the pit of my stomach. I didn't know what I was about to uncover, but I knew I had no choice. I had to see this through. The mansion itself was much larger up close than I had imagined. It was a Gothic structure with tall, imposing windows and ivy creeping up the sides of the stone walls. The door, large and heavy, creaked as I pushed it open, revealing a dusty, dimly lit interior. The air inside smelled musty, like a place long abandoned. The girl led the way, her footsteps quiet on the hardwood floors. We moved through a grand hallway, the walls lined with old portraits of stern-faced men and women I didn't recognize. As we passed, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. The mansion felt like it had a life of its own, as if the walls themselves held secrets. The basement's through here, the girl said, stopping in front of a large, ornate door at the end of the hall. The wood was old, the iron handle cold to the touch. I gripped it tightly and pushed. The door groaned open, revealing a dark staircase leading downward. The temperature dropped as we descended, the air thick with dust and the remnants of forgotten memories. At the bottom of the stairs, I could just make out the outline of a heavy wooden door. The girl moved toward it, her hand brushing the ancient stone walls. "This is it," she said, her voice steady but full of awe. "This is where it all started." I stepped forward, my heart pounding. As I reached for the door, I hesitated, unsure of what I might find behind it. But the girl had no such doubt. She opened the door, revealing a small room that looked more like a vault. Shelves lined the walls, filled with boxes, old books, and what appeared to be family heirlooms. But it wasn't the items that caught my eye. It was the safe in the corner. "That's what we're after," she said, nodding toward the safe. "Your father kept everything in there. The truth, the records, the history of everything." I walked over to the safe, my hand trembling as I touched the cold metal. "Do you know the combination?" I asked, looking back at the girl. She nodded, pulling out a small key from her pocket. "I know where it is," she said. "But it's not just about what's inside the safe. It's what you do with it once you find it." She knelt down in front of the safe and inserted the key. The door clicked open, revealing a collection of old documents, photographs, and a series of ledgers. I couldn't help but feel that what was inside this safe had the power to change everything I thought I knew about my family, the Hells Angels, and the life I had been living. As I sifted through the contents, one photograph caught my eye. It was of my father again, but this time, he was standing with a man I recognized, someone from the higher ranks of the Hells Angels. The photo was taken years ago, long before I had been born, but the look on my father's face was different. He wasn't the hardened man I remembered from stories. He was younger, more hopeful, as though he had been part of something noble. "What's this?" I asked, holding up the photograph. The girl looked at it and nodded. "Your father wasn't just a member of the Hells Angels, Jake. He was one of the original founders. And this man, he's the one who made the decisions, the one who led the club down the path it took. Your father, though, he was different. He tried to fight it, tried to change things. But in the end, the club swallowed him whole." I felt a rush of emotions, shock, confusion, anger. My father a founder? But he never told me. Why hadn't he told me this? What happened to him? I asked, my voice hoarse. The girl paused, her eyes darkening. "That's what you need to find out. You're the only one who can finish what he started." The safe had opened a door to more questions than answers. But one thing was clear. I wasn't just uncovering my father's past. I was stepping into a future I had never expected. And now, I had to decide what to do with the legacy that had been thrust upon me. The girl stood in the dimly lit basement, her fingers brushing against the old documents spread across the table. I watched her, feeling the weight of the moment settle in. The secrets, the history, the legacy that had been buried for so long. It was all unfolding in front of me. The truth about my father, about the Hells Angels, about everything I had ever believed in, was right there in my hands. But I couldn't shake the feeling that there was more to the story, more that I wasn't seeing yet. The safe had given me pieces, but those pieces were scattered, disconnected. I needed to put them together, and fast. The girl was moving through the papers quickly, like she already knew what to look for. She was good at this. She had to be. "What are you looking for?" I asked, my voice steady but tinged with urgency. She didn't look up from the papers. "The names," she said, her voice calm but filled with intent. "Your father's connection to the original members. It's all here. But you have to understand, this isn't just about you. This is about the future of the club. I frowned. The future of the club? She nodded slowly, still reading the papers. There's a plan. Your father was part of it. The club isn't just about motorcycles anymore, Jake. It's about power, control. And if you're going to survive this, you need to understand who's pulling the strings. My mind was racing. Power, control, survival. Those were words I was familiar with, but I had never thought of the Hells Angels in terms of a deeper, more dangerous plan. What do you mean? Who's pulling the strings? I asked, my voice sharper now. The girl finally looked up, her eyes meeting mine. The original leaders. They built this empire, Jake. But they're not around anymore. They left behind something, a legacy. And your father was supposed to take over. The words hit me like a punch. My father? Take over what? Take over what? I repeated, trying to make sense of it. The girl stood up, brushing the dust from her hands. The Hells Angels. But your father didn't want that life. He wanted out. He was going to destroy everything they had built, tear it down from the inside. But someone stopped him before he could finish the job. I stared at her, trying to understand. Who stopped him? She didn't answer right away, instead picking up a faded photograph from the pile of papers. The man in this photo. He's the one who took your father's place. The one who took everything from him. She handed me the photo. It was of a man I didn't recognize, but there was something about him that made my stomach churn. His eyes were cold, calculating. The Hells Angels patch on his leather jacket was worn, but it was clear he had earned it. This man, his name is Steele, the girl said, her voice tense. He's the leader now, and he's the one who controls everything. Your father was never meant to be in charge. Steele knew that. And when your father tried to take control, Steele made sure he couldn't. The anger I had felt earlier was replaced by something deeper now. Betrayal. This wasn't just a fight for survival. This was a fight for my father's legacy, and Steele had stolen it. Steele. I muttered, the name like acid in my mouth. He's the one who killed my father? The girl nodded, her expression grim. Not directly, but he was the one who made sure your father was silenced. And now he's coming for you. The realization hit me like a freight train. My father's death had never been an accident. It had been part of a larger plan, a move orchestrated by the man who now controlled everything. Steele had taken everything from me, my father, my legacy, my chance at a different life. And now, he was coming for me. What do we do now? I asked, the weight of the situation bearing down on me. We finish what your father started, the girl said, her voice firm. We bring Steele down. We take back what was stolen from you. It was a dangerous path, one that could lead to my death. But in that moment, I knew I had no other choice. I couldn't let Steele get away with this. I couldn't let him control the Hells Angels. My father had tried to destroy this empire, and now it was my turn to finish the job. Let's go, I said, my voice filled with determination. Where do we start? The girl smiled, a rare moment of light breaking through her usual seriousness. We start by finding Steele, and we make sure he never sees us coming. The storm outside raged on, but inside, I felt a fire ignite in my chest. I was going to take back what was mine. I was going to destroy the legacy Steele had built, and in doing so, I would rewrite my own. The Hells Angels had always been about loyalty and brotherhood, but now it was about survival, and I would survive at any cost. The rain continued to pour as I stepped into the night, the weight of everything pressing down on me. The girl had already disappeared into the shadows, moving swiftly as if she had been here before. I followed, the cold air biting at my skin, but it wasn't the weather that chilled me. It was the realization that I was about to go up against Steele, the man who had taken everything from me. We had no plan, no backup, just the will to see it through. My hands gripped the cold metal of the gun tucked into my jacket. It was a symbol of everything I had become, the man the Hells Angels had molded me into, the man who now had to take back what was stolen. We stopped in front of a rundown building, tucked away in the darker part of town. It was quiet, almost too quiet. The girl looked at me, her eyes scanning the area. This is it, she said, her voice steady. Steele's men are inside. We don't know how many, but we can't let him get away this time. I nodded, my jaw clenched tight. Where is he? I asked, my voice low. In the back, she said. But we need to be careful. He's not just a biker anymore. He's got connections, people who will fight for him. I swallowed hard, the fear and anger mixing together. I had seen Steele's influence, the way he controlled everything around him. The Hells Angels were no longer just about bikes. It was about power, control, and survival. And now, it was all coming to a head. "We'll take him down," I said, my voice sharp. The girl gave me a small nod before she disappeared inside. I followed, staying low, my heart pounding in my chest. We made our way through the dimly lit hallways, the smell of damp concrete filling the air. It felt like we were walking through a ghost town, the silence deafening. Every step we took, every corner we rounded, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was watching us. The girl paused in front of a door at the end of the hall. She looked back at me, her face serious. "This is it," she whispered. I took a deep breath, my pulse racing. "Ready?" I asked. She nodded, her hand on the door handle. We burst through the door, weapons drawn, but what we saw stopped me dead in my tracks. Steele was sitting behind a desk, surrounded by a few of his men. The room was lit by a single overhead light, casting harsh shadows on the walls. Steele's cold eyes locked onto mine, and for a moment, it felt like time stood still. "You think you can just walk in here and take everything from me?" Steele's voice was low, dangerous. "I built this empire. You're nothing." My anger flared, but I kept it in check. I wasn't here for a fight. I was here for something more. "I'm here to take back what you stole from me," I said, my voice steady. Steele chuckled, a harsh, cruel sound that filled the room. "You think you can just walk in and change everything?" he sneered. "You're weak, just like your father was." My blood ran cold at the mention of my father. "Don't talk about him," I growled, taking a step forward. Steele's smirk faltered for a split second, but he quickly regained his composure. "What's the matter? Can't take the truth? Your father was a fool, and you're no different. You think you can take down the Hells Angels? It's bigger than you, boy." His words cut deep, but I didn't let him see it. I had come too far to back down now. "I'm not here to talk," I said, my eyes never leaving his. "I'm here to end this." In an instant, the room erupted into chaos. Steele's men drew their weapons, but the girl was faster, taking them down one by one. I moved toward Steele, my eyes locked on his. He wasn't going to get away this time. Steele stood up, his eyes wide with anger. "You think you're better than me?" he spat, lunging toward me. I ducked, grabbing his arm and slamming him into the wall. He grunted, trying to fight back, but I was stronger, fueled by the rage and the need to take back what was mine. "You took my father from me," I growled, tightening my grip on his throat. "And now I'm taking everything from you." His face turned red, but he couldn't fight back. He was trapped. "You don't know what you're doing," he gasped, his hands clawing at mine. "You have no idea what you've just started." I tightened my grip, my heart racing. I was done with his lies, his games. "I'm ending this," I said, my voice cold. With one final push, I threw him to the ground, watching as he struggled to breathe. The girl stepped up beside me, her eyes cold and calculating. "It's over," she said. I nodded, my chest heaving as I tried to calm my racing heart. Steele had been the last obstacle standing in my way, and now he was nothing. The Hells Angels were no longer his to control. It was over. But even as I stood there, breathing heavily, I couldn't shake the feeling that this was just the beginning. There was still so much left to uncover, so much more to fight for. And I wasn't going to stop until I had it all. My father's legacy, my own place in the world, nothing would stand in my way. Not now. Not ever. The mansion was eerily silent, the storm outside now a mere whisper compared to the chaos that had unfolded within its walls. Steele lay on the floor, motionless, the weight of his reign now crumbling under the force of my resolve. The girl stood beside me, her expression unreadable, but I could feel the tension in the air. It was over. At least, I thought it was. As I caught my breath, the realization hit me. Taking down Steele wasn't the end. It was just another beginning. The power vacuum he left behind would be filled, but who would take control? And would they be any better than him? I glanced at the girl, the weight of the question hanging in the air. "What now?" I asked, my voice rough, still raw from the adrenaline that had been coursing through me only moments before. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she walked over to Steele's desk and began sifting through the papers that were scattered across it. I followed her, watching as she moved with a quiet, practiced efficiency. "We make sure his empire falls apart," she said, pulling out a file from a drawer. "And we make sure it doesn't get rebuilt by anyone else." Her words struck me like a punch. To the gut. I had always known that the Hells Angels weren't just about motorcycles. They were about power, and the game of power was always shifting. How do we stop it? I asked, feeling a sense of helplessness I wasn't used to. The girl didn't look up. We destroy the foundation. All the ties, all the deals, everything Steele built. It's all in these files. She held up a stack of papers, and I could see the weight of what she was saying. Steele's influence stretched far beyond just the Hells Angels. It reached into businesses, politicians, and powerful families. This wasn't just about taking down a club anymore. This was about dismantling an entire network. And you think we can just take it all down? I asked, a trace of skepticism in my voice. We have to. If we don't, someone else will take his place. And that someone might be worse. She turned to face me, her eyes piercing through me. It's not just about survival anymore, Jake. It's about making sure this doesn't continue. Your father knew that. That's why he tried to tear it all down. I felt a pang in my chest at the mention of my father. I had spent my whole life questioning who he was, what he stood for. Now, as I stood in the ruins of Steele's empire, I realized that my father had been trying to do what I was now forced to do. Fight a battle that no one would thank him for. A fight that might never end. What's the plan? I asked, my mind racing. We start with Steele's connections, she said, laying out the papers on the desk. We expose everything. Every shady deal, every secret contract. We go public, make it impossible for anyone to deny what's been happening. I studied her, trying to gauge whether this was truly the right move. The Hells Angels, the power they had wielded. If we exposed everything, what would be left? Would anyone even want to rebuild after the truth came to light? And if we expose all of this, I said slowly, what happens to the people still involved? The ones who don't want to let go of that power. She didn't flinch. We give them a choice. Get out, or face the consequences. It sounded simple enough, but I knew better. People didn't give up power easily. And what about us? I asked. What happens to us when this is all over? She met my gaze, her expression unreadable. We make sure we're not part of the problem. We don't take his place, Jake. We destroy it all. I let her words sink in. She was right. The moment we decided to take over, we would become what we had just destroyed. I wasn't ready for that. I couldn't be. Not after everything I had seen. Not after everything Steele had done. We spent the next few hours sorting through the files, piecing together Steele's web of lies and corruption. The more we uncovered, the clearer it became that this wasn't just a club. It was a powerful, shadowy empire that stretched far beyond the borders of the Hells Angels. It wasn't going to be easy, and it wasn't going to be clean. But I had no choice. I had to finish what my father started, even if it meant tearing everything down. We gathered everything we needed, preparing to make the first move. As we headed out of the mansion, I couldn't help but feel the weight of what was to come. The Hells Angels were no longer just a group of bikers. They were a symbol of something much bigger, something I was now a part of. The girl walked beside me, her eyes focused on the path ahead. This is just the beginning, she said, her voice low. Once we start, there's no turning back. I looked at her, my mind racing with thoughts of what lay ahead. The power, the danger, the people who would try to stop us. It was all coming to a head. But in that moment, as we stepped into the cold night, I knew one thing for sure. I wasn't backing down. Whatever came next, I was ready. We were going to tear down Steele's empire, and we weren't going to stop until it was all gone. The drive to the city was silent, the only sound being the steady hum of the engine as the rain continued to fall, heavier now, as though the storm itself was mirroring the chaos unfolding in my life. The girl sat beside me, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, her mind clearly miles ahead of the present moment. I couldn't blame her. The plan we had was risky, and I could feel the weight of every decision we had made so far bearing down on us. But I knew there was no turning back. The pieces were falling into place, and now, the truth we were about to expose was more than just about Steele. It was about the system, the corruption that had been feeding on the Hells Angels for years, and the people they had hurt along the way. I had spent my whole life fighting for survival, for my place in this world. Now, it seemed like I was fighting for something bigger, justice, even if it came at a cost. As we approached the meeting point, I could feel my heart rate increase. The city was alive with lights and sounds, but everything felt off, like something was about to snap. The girl turned to me, her voice breaking the tension in the air. "We're here," she said, nodding toward a warehouse in the distance. It was an unremarkable building, surrounded by a high fence and hidden in plain sight. the kind of place no one would ever suspect. But inside that warehouse was the information we needed, the final piece of the puzzle. Steele's connections, the deals, the people who had been pulling the strings for years. Everything was stored there, everything that could bring this empire crashing down. We parked the car and got out, moving swiftly, the rain soaking through my jacket as we approached the entrance. The girl led the way, her footsteps quiet but deliberate. "Stay close," she whispered, her voice barely audible above the sound of the storm. We reached the side of the warehouse, and she pulled out a small set of keys, unlocking a side door. "This way," she said, and we slipped inside. The interior of the warehouse was dimly lit, the air heavy with the scent of old wood and oil. The walls were lined with boxes, crates, and stacks of old equipment. Everything from motorcycles to construction tools, the detritus of years of deals gone by. But we weren't here for any of that. We were here for the files, the hidden documents that would finally tear Steele's empire apart. The girl led me down a narrow hallway, stopping in front of a door at the far end. She didn't hesitate. With another turn of the key, the door creaked open. Inside was a small office, cluttered with papers, filing cabinets, and a desk covered in more files. "This is it," the girl said, walking toward the desk. I followed her, my heart pounding in my chest as I looked around. There was no time to waste. "We find what we need, and we go," I said, my voice low and focused. She nodded, quickly rifling through the papers on the desk. "There's a safe in the back," she said. "It's where Steele kept everything. Everything we need to bring him down." I moved toward the back of the room, my eyes scanning the walls for anything out of the ordinary. It didn't take long to find the safe. It was built into the wall, hidden behind a shelf of dusty books. My hand instinctively went to my jacket, feeling for the tools I had brought. We couldn't afford to be caught. Every second was critical. As I worked to crack the safe, I could feel the girl's eyes on me. She was tense, alert, but there was something else there too, a sense of urgency. "You're sure this will work?" I asked, glancing up at her. She didn't answer immediately, but I could see it in her face. She had confidence in me, and that was enough. I twisted the last dial, and the safe door opened with a soft click. Inside, there were stacks of documents, files, and folders. Everything we needed. I grabbed the first stack and began flipping through it, my hands moving quickly. The girl pulled out another stack, her eyes scanning the contents just as fast. We worked in silence, the weight of the information we were uncovering sinking in with every passing moment. "This is it," she said suddenly, her voice breaking through the silence. "These are the files that tie everything together. Every deal, every name, every operation. This is what will bring him down." I nodded, my heart racing. But as I continued to read through the files, I began to feel the weight of the decision we were making. Exposing Steele, taking down his empire, it would destroy lives, tear apart families, and bring chaos to everything we had known. But it was the only way to stop the cycle. The Hell's Angels had been built on lies, power, and corruption, and it was time for it to end. I slammed the folder shut, looking at the girl. "We're done here," I said, my voice steady but filled with resolve. She nodded, her eyes meeting mine. "Let's go. We've got one last move to make." We grabbed the files, quickly making our way out of the warehouse. As we stepped back into the rain, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was coming. This wasn't the end. Not yet. The storm had only just begun. We stepped out into the rain, the files clenched in our hands, the weight of what we were about to do pressing down on us. The storm had only intensified, and I could feel the tension in the air, thick and heavy, like something was about to break. The girl moved quickly, her steps sure and purposeful, leading me back to the car. We had everything we needed now, but the hardest part was just beginning. We had to expose Steele and his network to the world, and that wasn't going to be easy. We couldn't just walk into the media or the authorities with these files. Steele had too many people in high places. If we were going to take him down, we had to be careful, methodical. The car was parked a few yards away, hidden under the shadow of a large tree. The girl unlocked the door and got in, her hands steady despite the chaos that loomed ahead. I climbed into the driver's seat, glancing at her as I started the engine. "You sure about this?" I asked, my voice low. "There's no turning back once we do it." She looked at me, her eyes cold but resolute. "I've never been more sure of anything in my life. We don't just take down Steele. We burn everything down, his empire, his power, everything he built. I nodded, understanding the gravity of her words. But there was something else. Something that had been bothering me since we stepped into the warehouse. And what about us? I asked, my voice a little more vulnerable than I intended. Once we expose everything, once Steele's gone, what happens to us? She didn't answer right away, and I could see the conflict in her eyes. We do what we have to do, she said finally, her voice quiet but firm. But we don't walk away from this. We're in it now, Jake. There's no escaping the fallout. We can't undo what's been done. I let her words sink in, the weight of it all pressing down on me like the storm outside. We were deep in it now, and the only way out was through. I started the car and pulled away from the side of the road, the sound of the rain against the windshield loud in the silence between us. We drove in silence for what felt like hours, though it was probably only a few minutes. The streets were slick, the night dark and oppressive, but I could feel the shift in the air. Everything had changed. Steele was gone, but his legacy, his power, was still out there. The Hells Angels weren't going to just let this slide. They would come for us. They would try to reclaim their hold, and we would have to fight to make sure that didn't happen. The girl turned to me, her eyes focused. We need to get this information out. To the right people, she said. We can't do this alone. I didn't need to ask who she meant. The media, the authorities, anyone with the power to expose the truth. The people who would have to carry the burden of this information to the world. I know, I said, the answer coming easily now. We had to trust the right people to make sure Steele's empire crumbled once and for all. We couldn't take on the whole network ourselves, but we could ignite the spark that would set it all in motion. Where do we start? I asked, already knowing the answer. She looked at me, her expression serious. We start with the media, but we don't go public just yet. We leak the files to them first. Make sure they're ready for what's coming. Then, when the world sees what Steele was hiding, we expose everything. I nodded, feeling a sense of determination well up inside me. This wasn't just about taking down one man. This was about stopping a system, about tearing down an empire built on lies and violence. We couldn't let it continue. I had to finish what my father started, and I would do whatever it took to make sure Steele's legacy died with him. We drove through the city, the streets now empty except for the occasional car passing by, the neon lights reflecting off the wet pavement. We reached the safe house, a small, inconspicuous building in the heart of the city. The girl led me inside, where we were met by a few people we had worked with before, journalists, investigators, people who could help us get the truth out. I handed them the files, the weight of it all heavy in my hands. This is it, I said, my voice steady. Everything you need to bring down Steele's empire. Take it to the right people. Make sure it gets out to the world. The journalist took the files, his eyes scanning them quickly before looking back at me. This is bigger than we thought, he said. But we'll get it out. You have my word. I nodded, feeling a strange sense of relief. The hardest part was done. Now it was up to them. The girl stood beside me, her eyes scanning the room, but her posture remained tense. I could tell she was still thinking, still calculating. We can't rest yet, she said quietly. This is just the beginning. Steele's people won't stop until they've taken everything back. We have to be ready for whatever comes next. I knew she was right. This wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But we had taken the first step, and that was all we needed. As the night stretched on, I realized one thing. Whatever came next, whatever danger we faced, we would face it together. There was no turning back. The storm had passed, but the real fight was just beginning. The tension in the safe house was palpable as the files we had exposed began to circulate among the right people. Journalists, investigators, and a few trusted allies were working quickly to get the information out to the world, but as the hours passed, I felt the storm shifting. The girl beside me, still calm but ever watchful, kept a sharp eye on everything happening around us. We couldn't afford to make any mistakes. Steele's people were out there, and they wouldn't let this slide easily. They would come for us, and when they did, we had to be ready. We can't rest now, the girl said quietly, her voice filled with the weight of what we both knew was coming. They'll try to stop this, and when they do, we'll need to be ready to fight back. I looked at her, the intensity of her gaze matching mine. We've done what we can, I said, trying to steady my own nerves. It's out there. All we can do now is wait. But I knew she was right. Waiting wasn't going to be enough. We had to prepare for the inevitable. The Hells Angels had never been a peaceful organization, and Steele's hold over them was too strong. He wouldn't let go without a fight. We spent the next few hours gathering what we would need. Weapons, communication gear, anything that could help us stay one step ahead. The people we trusted were in place, but the real threat was still out there, Steele's loyalists, the ones who wouldn't take kindly to the truth being exposed. What's the plan when they come for us? I asked, pulling on my jacket as I prepared to leave the safe house. The girl looked at me, her expression hardening. We hit them first. We take out their leadership, take down their operations. We don't wait to be attacked. We make sure they can't get close. I nodded, the weight of her words sinking in. It wasn't just about surviving anymore. It was about making sure Steele's empire never rebuilt itself. We were going to destroy it completely. We left the safe house in the dead of night, the city streets eerily quiet. It felt like we were on the edge of something huge, like the calm before a storm. But as we drove toward the warehouse where Steele's men were likely meeting, I couldn't shake the feeling that something else was about to go wrong. As we arrived at the warehouse, the first sign that we weren't alone came when we saw the black motorcycles parked outside. Steele's men were already here, waiting. I could feel my muscles tense, the adrenaline kicking in as the girl pulled the car into a dark corner. "We move fast," she whispered, her eyes locked on the building. "We don't let them see us coming." We exited the car, and in the quiet of the night, everything felt heightened, the faint rustle of our clothes, the sharp sound of our boots on the pavement. We moved like shadows, silent and deliberate. The girl led the way, her steps sure and quick. We reached the side of the warehouse, where a small door stood open. I felt a flicker of unease as we slipped inside, the dim interior barely lit by a single overhead light. The place was cluttered with old boxes and crates, the scent of dust and mildew thick in the air. It was a stark contrast to the chaos outside. The girl motioned for me to stay close, and I followed her deeper into the building. The faint sound of voices reached my ears. We were getting closer. I could feel the tension building, every step bringing us closer to the confrontation. As we rounded a corner, I saw them. A group of Steele's men, gathered around a table, speaking in low voices. They didn't notice us at first, too focused on their plans. But the girl had already moved into position, and I followed her lead. Without a word, she signaled, and we moved in. The first man barely had time to react before the girl had him on the ground, his weapon knocked from his hand. The others turned, but it was too late. We had the advantage. A firefight erupted, but it was over quickly. Steele's men didn't stand a chance against the two of us. We were faster, sharper, and more determined than they were. When it was over, the warehouse was silent again, the only sound the heavy breathing of the few remaining men we had taken down. The girl stood over them, her eyes scanning the room, making sure there were no more surprises. "It's done," she said, her voice cold. "Steele won't be able to recover from this." I looked around the warehouse, the weight of what we had just done settling in. We had taken down the core of Steele's operation, but I knew this wasn't the end. There were still more out there, still more people who would fight to hold on to what they had. And we would be ready. We gathered the information we had come for, more names, more connections, more evidence to take down the rest of Steele's empire. As we walked out of the warehouse, I knew the storm wasn't over. The battle had just begun. We would keep pushing forward, one step at a time, until every last trace of Steele's reign was gone. The girl glanced at me as we drove away, her face still set in that familiar expression of determination. "This is only the beginning," she said, her words heavy with meaning. I didn't need her to say it. I could feel it in the air, in the way everything had shifted. This wasn't just about taking down Steele. It was about everything that had been hidden for so long, everything that had been buried in the shadows. And I was going to bring it all into the light. The night was still heavy with the rain as we drove through the city, the streets reflecting the dim glow of streetlights. The warehouse lay behind us, and I could still feel the tension in the air, the weight of what we had just done. We had taken down Steele's men, but that was only one piece of the puzzle. The fight was far from over. As we drove in silence, I kept replaying everything in my mind. The faces of the men we had taken down, the shock in Steele's eyes when I finally stood face to face with him. It had felt like a turning point, but now, I realized it was just the start of a much larger battle. "What now?" I asked, breaking the silence. The girl glanced at me, her gaze steady, unshaken by the chaos we had just unleashed. "Now, we make sure Steele's people can't regroup," she said, her voice calm but filled with intent. We go after the rest of the network, the ones who are still operating in the shadows. I nodded, knowing that she was right. There was no point in taking down Steele if we didn't destroy everything he had built. It wasn't just about the Hells Angels anymore. It was about tearing apart the entire system, the whole underground network he had tied together. The girl had been right from the beginning. It wasn't just about taking down one man. It was about everything. We've got to keep moving, I said, gripping the steering wheel a little tighter. We can't let them get the upper hand again. We drove toward the next target, a place the girl had marked on the map we had gathered earlier. It was another warehouse, another stronghold of Steele's men. But this time, there was a new sense of urgency in the air. This wasn't just a raid. It was a race to make sure the pieces didn't fall into place for Steele's empire to rise again. When we arrived at the warehouse, we parked a little further down the street, staying out of sight. The rain had slowed, but the darkness still felt suffocating. I could feel the weight of the moment again, the need to act, the desire to keep pushing forward, and the knowledge that every step we took would bring us closer to whatever was next. We got out of the car, checking our weapons and making sure we had everything we needed. The girl moved with precision, leading the way as we approached the building. We were silent, each step deliberate, knowing that the moment we entered that warehouse, everything would change again. The door to the warehouse creaked as we slowly pushed it open, stepping into the shadowy interior. It smelled of old machinery and oil, the kind of place where secrets were kept and deals were made. The sound of our footsteps was swallowed by the vastness of the space, but I could feel the presence of others, Steele's men, no doubt, scattered across the dark corners of the warehouse. The girl motioned for me to follow her as she moved toward the back, where we knew the main office was located. We were getting closer to the heart of this operation, the place where Steele's influence still held sway. The sound of voices reached us, low and muffled, but enough to know they were preparing for something. "We move fast," the girl whispered. "We get in, take them down, and get out." I nodded. We had no time to waste. The fight for control of this operation had already begun, and we were going to finish it. As we rounded the corner, we came face to face with two of Steele's men, standing guard at the office door. They barely had time to react before the girl was on them, disarming them with ruthless efficiency. I moved in, making sure they couldn't get back up. There was no room for mercy now. We entered the office, and the sight that met us made my stomach churn. There were maps pinned to the walls, each one marked with locations of deals, hideouts, and contacts. It was a web of corruption that stretched far beyond Steele. This was the network that had fueled his rise to power, and it was bigger than I had ever imagined. The girl moved quickly, grabbing a file from the desk. "This is it," she said, holding up a folder filled with names, addresses, and coded messages. "This is everything." I looked at the papers, realizing that with this information, we could dismantle the entire operation. Steele was no longer just a problem. He was a symptom of a much larger issue, one that we had to expose completely. But as I scanned the file, a sudden noise came from the back of the warehouse. I froze. "They're here," I whispered. The girl didn't hesitate. She grabbed a weapon from the table, ready for the inevitable fight. "We don't have much time. Let's finish this." The door behind us crashed open, and more of Steele's men flooded into the room. The battle that followed was quick and brutal. We moved with precision, using the element of surprise to our advantage. There was no hesitation, no mercy. Steele's men fell one by one, their resistance futile against the firepower and determination we had brought. But I knew it wasn't over. This was only a small victory in a much larger war. As we finished clearing the warehouse, the girl and I shared a look, both of us understanding what had to come next. "This isn't over," I said, my voice firm. "We've got one more step to take." She nodded, her expression hardening. "We take this information to the media. We expose everything. And then, we make sure no one ever tries to rebuild what Steele had." The weight of her words settled in, and I knew she was right. The Hells Angels, Steele's empire, it all had to end. And we were the ones who were going to make sure it did. The morning after the chaos felt like a new beginning, yet the weight of everything we had done still hung in the air. We had made sure the files were in the right hands. The truth about Steele and his empire was out, and his reign was over. But as the hours passed, I realized that nothing would ever truly be the same again. The girl and I sat in the car, parked outside the office of the journalist who had agreed to leak the files to the world. He had already started working on the story, gathering the pieces, and once the world saw what Steele had done, there would be no turning back. But I wasn't sure what came next. What did we do now that the fight was over? We've done it, I said, my voice almost a whisper. The girl glanced over at me, her eyes cold, but with a hint of something else. Relief, maybe. Yeah, it's done, she said. But you're right. This isn't the end. It's just the beginning. Her words echoed in my mind. She was right. The exposure of Steele's empire was just the first step. The real work, the real challenge, was about making sure this didn't happen again. The power he had built could easily be rebuilt by someone else, and we needed to make sure the Hell's Angels didn't continue down this path. I turned the car's engine on, the low hum of the motor feeling strangely comforting. So what now? I asked, glancing over at her. She was quiet for a moment before speaking, her tone thoughtful. Now we move on. The world will see the truth, and we make sure no one tries to take over. We can't stop here. We need to keep pushing, make sure everything falls apart. All of it. I nodded slowly, taking in her words. She was right. We couldn't afford to stop. We had to make sure the damage that Steele had done didn't get rebuilt. There were too many people out there, too many who had been complicit in his reign of power. But as I thought about it, I also knew one thing for sure. This life, this fight, had changed me. I wasn't the same person I had been when I started. The girl had changed me too. She had shown me a different path, a way out of the darkness, but at the same time, I knew I couldn't just walk away from everything. I had been pulled into this world, and no matter how hard I tried to escape, I was bound to it. The Hell's Angels, the power, the danger, it was all part of me now. You think we can make it stick? I asked, breaking the silence. The girl didn't look at me as she answered. I think we can, but it won't be easy. We've got the truth, but now we need to make sure everyone hears it. We sat in silence for a moment, each of us thinking about the future. The world was about to change, and I wasn't sure what that meant for either of us. The Hell's Angels might never be the same again, but the fight wasn't over. Not for me. Not for her. We had a lot of work to do, and the battle for control wasn't over. We needed to rebuild, to make sure the power didn't shift back into the wrong hands. As I turned the car onto the highway, I realized that no matter how much I wanted to leave this life behind, it was part of me. And the girl beside me, her resolve, her strength. She was a reminder that there was still hope, even in a world as dark as this one. We weren't done. The fight had just begun. The road ahead would be dangerous, and we would face challenges that tested everything we believed in. But I wasn't afraid anymore. We had the truth on our side, and that was enough to keep going. The world was about to see what we had uncovered, and nothing could stop it now. We were no longer running from the past. We were taking control of the future,